These are the notes on how to complete note and source cards for the English 9 research project. One of the things I wanted to talk about is why we do MLA formatting. MLA stands for Modern Language Association, and what that means is MLA is the system we use to organize and format our collection of research. It gives us a standard way of documenting where we find our research, and it helps give credit where credit is due. And what it does is it builds consistency. So if I was looking at someone's a ninth grade student from California, they were using MLA format in their paper, I would be able to understand their citations just as I would you, because it's a universal standard for formatting. So as we go through our collection of research and looking at our articles, our websites, our books, we're going to be keeping track of our research, meaning how we collect it, on using two types of index cards. The first card we're going to create is a source card. This type of card lists all of the details about where to find this source again. Again, it would give us information on the author, the title of the work, what year it was published, any information that would help me go and search and find that source again. And so we'll create one source card per source. The second thing we're going to create are note cards. We can have as many note cards from a source as we want. These are the actual information, this is the actual information we take from a source, meaning like the direct quotes or the paraphrase pieces of information we might eventually use in our paper to quote or paraphrase. So for each source you would have one source card, but you can have multiple note cards. What we're going to do first is talk about how to go through and create a source card. These are the basic steps. First and foremost, what we want to do is we want to give the source a source number in the upper right hand corner. Literally just write number 1, 2, 3. Your source number is determined based on how many sources you've used so far. So if this is the first source you're looking at, you would give it source number 1. If it's the second source you're looking at, you would give it source number 2. So you want to go in order of what source card you're on. The second thing you're going to do is write the source citation, meaning the information on how to find it again using MLA formatting. We're going to go over 3 specific types that we're going to use throughout this research project. We're going to look at how to make a source citation for a book. We're going to look at how to make a source citation for a website, and we're going to look at how to do so for a database article. So the first one we're going to talk about is how to make a source card for a book. This right here is our sample source card. So notice we have our source number and we have a bunch of information. What we're going to do is we're going to go through on what you should put on each of these things. So first and foremost, you want to make sure that you put your source number. This has number 1 because this is the first source that we're looking at. The next thing that we would write is we would look in the book and we would find the author or the editor of the book. We would know if it was an editor if it said the words ED after the name. Notice we have it last name, comma, first name, and the reason why we have that is because we often alphabetize our authors by their last names. Notice also there's a period after that. MLA is very specific on their punctuation because they want to make sure we separate and understand the information. So after we have our source number and we have our author and editor, the next thing we're going to put is the title of the book, and that's going to go in italics. According to MLA format, book titles go in italics. The next thing we're going to put is the place of publication. You would find this information in the behind the title page of the book. If you flip through and you see the title page that has the title and the author, if you flip over, there's really tiny print, and a lot of times you'll find the place of publication there. Make sure that you're using the city, not the state or the country, but try and find a city. Then notice we have different punctuation. We have a colon, and then we have the publisher of the book. Then we have a comma. Then we put the year of publication, the date of publication, which again we would find on the same page as our place of publication and our publisher. And then last but not least, we put print. This is the type of media. The book, for the purposes of our research project, the book is the only one that gets print. And then and I've gotten it really emphasized here, we always end our citations just like we would a sentence with a period. The next type of source card we're going to make is a source card for a website. Here's my sample source card. We're going to go through and label this information. And notice I've given it source number 2 because this is the second source I've created a source card for. So this is if we were looking through a website online, a .org, a .gov, a .com, and we've noticed that it has some good information. and we are going through and clicking multiple pages on the website. If you're literally only looking at one page on the site, we would cite it a little bit differently, which we're going to talk about here. However, for most cases, we would click on multiple links throughout the site, therefore we would cite it as a website. Just like the book, we start with an author or editor. Most websites do not have authors, so if that's the case, we would actually just start our source card with the next thing, which is the title of the website. That can mostly be found at the top of your web page. If we don't have an author, we don't write no author, we don't write anonymous, we literally just skip it and move on to the next thing. After we have our author and editor and then our title of the website written in italics, we have the publisher or sponsor of the website. This you can normally find by scrolling all the way to the bottom. Sometimes your website title might be the same as your publisher. Then after our publisher, we put a comma, and then we put our date of publication. If it says multiple dates or it doesn't have a date, go with the most current year that we're in. The next thing we're going to put is the type of media. This type of media, because we're viewing it on the web, on a website, online, we're going to write web. For the sake of our project, remember books are the only one that get print. Web fits for a website or a database article. Then the last date that we put on here is actually the date of access, meaning the date we access this information. The reason why it's important for us to cite the date of access is because on where this, for example, was my date of access is March 9th, 2013, a website can change in a matter of seconds. A book is a little more complicated, so we don't have to often cite the date of access of a book because it takes a long time for it to be republished. But a website can change overnight. So therefore, if I viewed this website on March 8th, 2013, it might have different information than it does on March 9th. That's why we have to cite our date of access. And then last but not least, we have a period. You'll notice, though, that we don't actually have to write, even though it's a website, we don't have to write the MLA citation URL. We don't have to write down the web address. And the reason why is because MLA has decided by this point that if you have the title of the website, you have the sponsor, you have the author, you have the date of publication, a lot of times you could just go to a search engine and type in that information and you'd be able to see that source again. The third type of source card we're going to create is for an article on a database. So remember when we were in the Media Center, we looked at different databases such as Gale Power Search, SIRS Knowledge Source, Masterfile Premier. All of those are articles on a database. So technically, when we go to make an article on a database source card, we have to cite three different things. We have to cite the article title. Then we have to cite where that article was originally published. What is the magazine, journal, or newspaper where that came from? And lastly, we have to cite the database that it came from. Just like our other ones, we start with our source number. Again, this is source number 3 because it's the third source card we've made. Then we put the author or editor of the article. Most of the time, that's the first editor that we'll find, or author that we'll find, but that's just make sure it's the author or editor of the article. Then the next thing that we're going to put is in quotes. We're going to put the title of the article. This is the only title that gets formatted in quotes. All other titles besides article titles get written in italics. The title of an article, it doesn't matter if it's an article on a database, an article on a website, an article in a newspaper, it always goes in quotes. Then we have our name of the magazine, journal, or newspaper where this article was originally published, and that's written in italics. Then we're going to put the date of publication of the article. And then notice we have a little colon. Then the next thing that we have are page numbers. A lot of times you can find these in the citation or somewhere on the page. However, if you can't find the page numbers where this was originally published, you can just skip that information. Then the third thing we technically have to cite, the third level, is our database where this came from. Make sure if you're looking on an article from a database, a lot of times at the very end of the article, they already have this MLA citation written for you. So double check what your database title is, because even though you may search in Gale Power Search, you'll find out that sometimes your database titles are not going to be listed as Gale Power Search. They're going to be listed as a more specific database. Then we put web, because even though this article may have been published originally in print in a magazine, we're viewing it online on an online database. Therefore, we put web. And then last but not least, we put our date of access. And then, like we've done before, we put a period to signify at the end of our citation. Again, Just like we did on a website, you do not have to write down the URL because we have all the necessary information from now on. There are two other types of citations you might need to know for the sake of this project. I'm not going to make us take notes on them, but the first one is an article in a book. So you'll notice some of the books that we're going to look at in class have different authors for different pieces of the book, and those are often referred to as articles in a book. So if we were doing those, we would cite them accordingly. We would talk about the article author, then the title of the article, the title of the book. We would write the book author's name, and most of the time that might be an editor. Then we're going to have the city of publication, the publisher, the year, the page range of articles, and then we would write print as our type of media. The other type of citation we might need to use is an article or a page on a website. This we would use if we weren't citing the whole website. In this case, you would do the same sort of thing as our other website card, except you would include the title of the article. That's really the only difference between that and the whole website. If you want any more information about different MLA citations and different formatting for different types of sources, such as a YouTube video or a tweet or an interview, you can look at al.english.purdue.edu, or you can just Google MLA citation, whatever source it is, and I'm sure you'll be able to find it. The next part that we're going to talk about is how to create a note card. This is after we've already gone through the source, we've skimmed it, we've determined it has information that would be relevant for our paper, we've created our source card, and now we need to start taking our notes. Think of your note cards as things that you would highlight in the article as important information and what you would eventually put on different cards. So here are our steps to create a note card. First, we would write the source number in the upper right-hand corner. This source number comes from the source card where this was written down. So if this was the 5th source that we've used, all of our note cards from this source would get number 5. If this was the 2nd source from the source card, all of our note cards from this source would get number 2, and we'll show you that in a second. The second thing you want to do is give your cards a heading. These would be great topics that we brainstormed in class that you would eventually use to create the controls of your thesis statement. The next thing you're going to do is make sure to make your notes, whatever information you would highlight or you would collect from the source. Make sure you're not writing more than 3 sentences. I would not bullet. Again, the point of us getting so many note cards is because we've broken down this information. Then last but not least, if there is a page number, make sure to write it in the lower right-hand corner. So here's an example for you. The first thing we're going to do is give it the source number. So what that source number tells me is that this is from source number 2. The reason why source numbers are extremely important on note cards is right now, looking at this card, there's nothing that identifies who the author of this source is. The only information we have is to look at the source number. What this tells me on this note card is that the person that wrote this piece of information wrote for source number 2. The next thing we're going to put is our topic or our subtopic, and from there, that's going to help us eventually be able to sort these into paragraphs. You don't want to make sure that you use just one topic and subtopic the whole time, because then it's going to be harder for you to sort these cards when you go to write your paragraphs. What I would suggest doing is making a variety of different topics to use. So if you're talking about causes or effects or treatment or different subtopics that we would have brainstormed in class, some of them should be the same, but not all of them. The next thing we're going to do is write down the fact or info. This can either be paraphrased information or information that is directly quoted. And then last but not least, you're going to write down the page number where this information is found if it's given. If it's not given, literally just skip it. Now, when you're collecting this information, there's going to be 2 types of notes you're going to take from an article. You can either choose to quote the information, meaning you would write it word for word exactly as it's written, and you would use quotation marks to specify that. Or the second thing you're going to do is paraphrase it. What this means is you're going to take the author's ideas and put them into your own words. So as you're taking this information down on your note cards, here are some rules if you're choosing to quote. First and foremost, make sure you're using the exact words of the author. And you want to keep their punctuation as well, and you want to identify it using quotation marks. You want to make sure that you also capitalize the quote according to its use in a sentence, meaning if you start a sentence with a quote, you would put it with a capital letter. If you use a quote in the middle of a sentence, most of the time you would use a lowercase letter to begin. Then last but not least, you never want to quote part of an idea that distorts the author's meaning. We want to make sure that we are keeping their ideas as clear as they possibly can be presented. If you choose to paraphrase on your notes, here are some rules for you. You want to make sure in your paraphrasing you are keeping the ideas the author intended. You don't want to change any of their thoughts to appeal to your side. You want to make sure it's expressing their original information. However, if there's anything in the idea that doesn't support what it is you're trying to say or trying to prove, make sure you leave it out as long as it's not distorting their point. And then last but not least, with paraphrasing, you want to use your own sentence structure. Simply changing a few words around does not make it paraphrased. You actually have to have your own sentence structure. Everything that we just talked about is what you do before you write your actual information. This is all of the information that you're going to use in your collection of research, in your gathering of note and source cards that will eventually help you develop your research paper. For more information on what to do after you've got all your research, tune into our next video.